Six. So I have 27 of these?
Probably.
Probably. God, I hope. There were some folks that had some questions about acids and bases last time, and I made a couple of students a promise I would go through them again, kind of quickly before we get into new stuff. Did this definition sort of make sense to folks a little bit? If folks have had chemistry in the past, or if they're in it now, like Chem 111, anybody like Chem 111? I think I've asked this before. Anybody taking chemistry or have taken chemistry or pretty decent at it in high school? There are like 4 or 5 different definitions for acids and bases. There's like, Lewis acids and bases. There are Arrhenius acids and bases, right? There's definitions that have to do with like oxidation state. There's definitely, there's like 4 or 5 definitions of what it means to be an acid and a base, depending sort of on what you're doing. What are we doing? I think we're doing Lewis acids and bases. That's typically the biology way. Is that right?
I took it in first.
Just like that. Yeah, that's right. Cool. So the way that we talk about, again, I just want to emphasize again, it's a biology class. It's not a chemistry class. So let's not get too hung up in the details. But this acid-base thing is a little bit, it's kind of like a zombie. It keeps coming up out of the grave over and over again throughout the entirety of your biology career. So we want to make sure that we're pretty clear on how this works. And so there's like the initial conversation of acids, which is, and bases, which is just like, what does water do? What does water do? And that conversation about like, what does water do is what water does naturally to result in a pH of 7. Correct? So like the pH of water is 7 statement is a description of what water does in its natural state by itself with no other weird stuff going on. Correct? So water by itself will do, by doing N, nothing about this conversation has anything to do with an N. I could have just like left that because I'm literally doing the exact same place. Technically, I should go like that. So water comes apart into a hydrogen ion, which is essentially a proton. And the hydroxide ion, this is not the last time today we'll hear the word hydroxide. Okay? We'll talk about functional groups a little bit. So you'll hear this word again soon. And so this is like, and this is where I was last time with it. If you just have like a bottle of water or a glass of water or whatever it is, this is what water is doing. And when we think about what is the pH of this solution, we think of it from the perspective of this thing, the hydrogen ion. We don't really think about this. It's really just what is the concentration of hydrogen ions in the solution. And if it is 0.0000001, then we take the negative log of that, and that equals 7. So what that tells you is if you have 10 million molecules of water, one of those will have come apart into a hydrogen ion and a hydroxide. And then it's going to come back together again. And as soon as it comes back together again, a different one is going to come apart into a hydrogen ion and a hydroxide ion. You with me? So at any given time, the concentration the concentration in the glass of the hydrogen ions is at any time 1 out of every 10 million has currently come apart. So what we count is, for pH, is the concentration of that. If we add a whole lot of zeros here, like if we have like 10 or 11 zeros, that's like 1 out of every 10 billion is separated apart. The best way to do that is to add a lot of these to it. If you add a lot of hydroxide ions, it's going to start, or ammonia, it's going to start like sucking up those protons out of the solution as soon as they come apart and turning them into water. So the concentration of the hydrogen ions will go down. But since we're taking the negative log, as the concentration of the hydrogen ion goes down, the pH goes up. And we call those bases. The easiest way to add hydrogen ions to a solution is to just pour them in, right? So we can take something that comes apart very easily, like hydrogen chloride, HCl. As soon as we put that in the water, it's going to come apart into its hydrogen ion and a chlorine. Chlorine's going to hang out. But this is going to go to like, whoa, there's a lot more hydrogen ions. So the actual concentration is now over here, which would give us something like a pH of 4. Like a pH of 4. So the pH would drop as we add hydrogen ions, and we would call that solution acidic. Acidic. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
So like that kind of weird question is about like, so you throw ammonia, NH3 into a solution, looks like an acid, acts like a base, right? So because it's like, it's not about adding, so it's like when we think about a base, we primarily think of stuff like this. That's gonna, just kind of, it's sort of sloppy way of thinking about it, where it's like, acids have a lot of hydrogen ions, bases have more hydroxide ions. That's true. Bases tend to have more hydroxide ions, and they usually do that by either adding hydroxide ions, which suck up the protons, or by introducing anything that has a latent negative charge or paired valence electrons that are bonded, that will then attract the hydrogen ions out of solution and pull them out. But being an acid or a base is not about this. It's entirely about this and whether or not it's going up or down. So whether you add, hydrogen chloride, whether or not you add sodium hydroxide, whether or not you add carbonic acid or whatever it is, all of the different things you can do to make pH go up and down are strategies for affecting this. You with me? And there's a million ways to do it. Ammonia is not the only thing out there that looks like an acid but acts like a base. You with me? Good.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Can we loop close acids and bases? For now. Can we loop close without forgetting about it? Delightful. All right. Carbon, see, that's smart. How many bonds can we make with this?
4.
At this point, I'll say you better not be looking at your notes. Right. Answer's 4, perfect. We can bond all kinds of things to this carbon. Just so you know, we have just started chapter 3 as of 45 seconds ago. We started chapter 3. Technically. Let's add things to this carbon. We have 4 different slots we can fill. I'm going to add something on this side. Here's this. I'm just going to add the same thing all around. 4 hydrogens. This is our absolute positively simplest hydrocarbon we can think of. It is called methane. CH4. If we have a big, fancy molecule somewhere that has all kinds of stuff attached to it in all kinds of fancy ways, and we can attach part of this onto this molecule and make it bigger, not by adding individual elements, but by adding like larger side chunks to it. If you do that, you have pretty much started doing organic chemistry, which is fun. Isn't it great? Organic. Love it. In order, if we wanted to add, so this is like a glucose molecule, and we want to add covalently this thing to it, somehow like, I want to attach this thing to this thing. You know, what would that look like? Well, we'd have to dump one of these hydrogens, correct?
Yes.
We'd have to like make a space for that to happen, which we can do. We can attach it like that. This by itself is called methane. This, when it's attached to something else, is called a methyl group. Methyl group. A methyl group. So you would say that this molecule has been methylated. Genes turn on and off in your body by a process called methylation. Right? You add methyl groups to your DNA to turn the genes on and off. It's pretty interesting. If we have, what is this?
Water.
Trying to think about it. Water molecule. Let's add some of this water molecule to this carbon over here. So again, we're going to have to make a space on the oxygen. So we're going to have to take something off. Let's find a space over here. Let's do it here. Perfect. Everybody's valence count is full, right?
Yes.
Nice and stable. We would call this here a hydroxy or a hydroxyl group. So we have methylated and hydroxylated this glucose molecule. Cool.
Yeah.
There's another one that we oftentimes see in biological systems. There's a couple of them that have a carbon backbone to them, not just the methyl one. It'd be a carbon double bonded to an oxygen with a hydrogen stuck off to the side. We can add this one here. Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. So here, carbon has 4 covalent bonds, correct?
Mhm.
Oxygen has its 2, hydrogen has its 1. Everything is good, correct? We would call this a carbonyl or a carbonyl group. This one. Got this one. Got that one. Go ahead.
Do you need all 3 of those? Like if it was just the like double bonded oxygen with the hydrogen, like and the glucose, like with none of the other 2, would it still be carbonyl group?
What?
What?
Got the chalk and show me what you mean.
Oh.
You're no stranger to chalk and the chalkboard at this point, right? You're extremely
wanna-
comfortable with it. Draw it and ask.
Okay. This is gonna be an ugly shape. Oh man.
She hasn't really done anything yet. You have a case of the sorries.
Oh yeah, I do. People tell me that a lot,
Yeah.
actually.
Just so you know, there are very few people in this room that have better chalk handwriting than you do.
Really? Wow.
Do you agree?
They haven't got
I didn't say none, I said very few, right?
Is that still that? Carbonyl?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the same thing. It's just in a different spot.
Oh, like it's. I just mean alone. Like you don't need those 2.
No, all of these exist in isolation.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just being fancy by attaching them all to one.
When they're together, though, is it something else?
This is hydroxymethylglucose.
That's a big word.
So it's like, yeah, you just keep adding the name on the front of it, you know, to do it. This would be, how does that work when you count around? You start at the oxygen, so this would be like 1, 3, this is 1 methyl, 3 carboxy, 5 hydroxyglucose.
Stop, it's too confusing.
Is what this is, right? Because like when you have these carbon rings, you number the carbons, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you see like these big, like if you read the ingredients on like a multivitamin, that's a fancy one, or some of these big organic chemistry compounds, sometimes it's like the chemical formula has numbers in it, and it's not numbers that indicate the number, it's not the subscript number for the number of atoms, and it's not the superscript one, that's the number of molecules. It's like 1,3 bicarboxy glucose or something like that. Those little 1,3 dash ones is the number of the carbon in the ring that it's attached to. So with organic chemistry, the name of the thing doesn't only tell you what the chemistry is, it tells you the structure of the thing as well. Because this methyl attached to this carbon versus this carbon is different. It gives you a different molecule with some different bonding properties. So it's like in organic chemistry, you have to number the carbon that the side group is actually attached onto. This is a problem that most of you will never face in your entire life. But if you're ever on Jeopardy, now you know the answer. Cool? And if that's a question, if you're on Jeopardy and you get it right and you win, I get 10%. That's all I'm saying. Perfect. So if I would have started this with carboxy instead of these two, when I would have drawn this, it would still be a carbonyl. We can make this even fancier though. I'm gonna just tweak your diagram here if I can. With your permission, I'm gonna add to the artist's work. We can actually add an OH onto this carbon. So it's the exact same as the carbonyl group, but it's not a hydrogen. It's like you added a hydroxy to a carbonyl group. Yes, this is now
Oh.
a carboxyl group. So carbonyl has a hydrogen, carboxyl has an OH.
Is it because one's hydroxide, one's hydrogen?
Yes. So you add the ox on it.
What would be the name of that molecule?
This one,
No, CH3COOH. The
see
glucose attached.
this one,
Carboxyl.
that'd be 1 carboxyl glucose.
No, I mean like the result of it.
What are we doing to it to get, what, say again. So like, if you saw this, what would you call it?
Yeah,
That would be 1 carboxyl glucose.
just one thing.
There's only one thing attached to it,
It doesn't have any name.
1 carboxyl glucose. Like if if the pharmaceutical industry wanted to name it, like in a pharmaceutical way. Do you ever watch those pharmaceutical commercials? Like you're watching Netflix or whatever it is, and it's like,
Yeah,
take whatever, right? And then people walk around on the beach looking all happy because they're taking that pharmaceutical. And then it's like they take a popular song from the 80s or 90s and change the words of it so it includes the name of the. That's so weird. There's one more we're going to learn. Super easy. It's a sulfur molecule bonded to a hydrogen. And sulfur is in the same column as oxygen. See it? See it? So 2 covalent bonds. It has a whole nother shell, but it still just has 2 covalent bonds that it can make. 288. Awesome. This is called a sulfhydryl group. Anyone like to take a picture for their own personal use? We're good? Perfect. What somebody you might be asking right now is, who cares? Go ahead.
What's the carboxyl? What's in that one? I can't.
Carbon,
Carbon.
a hydroxyl group,
Okay.
and an double bonded to an oxygen off the carbon as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sulfhydryl. Back to my earlier question. So what? So what, right? So what? Why are you making me memorize, bless you, my child? Why are you making me memorize like weird side chain kind of things? Of what use could this possibly be? Of what use could this possibly be? I will show you. When we talk about the content of chapter 3, we're going to use this word to talk about these molecules we're going to talk about in chapter 3 over and over and over and over and over again in Bio 101, in Bio 102, in Bio 103, Bio 104, there's not a 103, Bio 105, right, Bio 20, whatever, Bio 30, whatever they are called. Macro molecules, macromolecules, of which there are 4. Carbohydrates. What is another word for these? If you wanted to talk about it in general, carbs, sugars, all the good kind of stuff like that. Anything that has the molecular formula of CH2O to the X coefficient is a carbohydrate. So anything that looks like C6H12O6, C3H6O3, C5H10O5. All carbohydrates have that when they exist like in isolation of a single molecule, will have that chemical formula. It's like the CH2O to the whatever multiple. Bless you. Sound good? Make sense? Perfect. What do you use carbohydrates for?
Energy.
Energy. Awesome. What else? What else in the animal kingdom uses carbohydrates? What else in the plant kingdom? What else in
ATP?
Photosynthesis.
photosynthesis makes carbohydrates, right? The product of photosynthesis is a carbohydrate. Insect exoskeletons are made of carbohydrates, which is kind of fun. What do trees do with this glucose when they make it through via photosynthesis? They make cell walls out of it that you refer to as like wood, is a good carbohydrate. All good stuff. Carbohydrates. More about those for the next 2 semesters. Lipids, aka fats, of which there are 3. Triglycerides. Triglycerides. What do we use triglycerides for? 2 things. 3 things. Is that a hand up?
Calcium muscle related?
What?
Is it calcium and muscle related?
Lipids?
No, the triglyceride.
Perhaps your question will be answered in the next 5 minutes. What do we do with triglycerides? I will point to them on my body right now.
Make clothes.
Just right
Store.
Longer term energy storage, it's okay to say, right? When we, perhaps when we consume an excessive number of macromolecule 1, right, we end up storing some of that energy that we don't burn off immediately as macromolecule 2, right, the triglyceride. Longer, it's energy, when we get carbohydrates, when we have carbohydrates in the body, we burn those first. Always. If we start as like, wow, okay, we have an excess and times are going to get lean, because they always do. When we have excess carbohydrates, we'll store them, then we'll convert them in the liver into lipids and store them for longer term, which we put underneath the skin usually, which gives it other properties as well. It also provides impact resistance. Who has ever seen a baby? Anyone ever seen a baby? They're just like you, but like a lot smaller and proportionally very different. And they have so many triglycerides packed under their skin. When you touch them, has anybody ever touched one? 3 people in this room have touched a baby in their life. You have never touched it like an infant. You have never made contact with an infant human. Okay, cool. It's almost hard to tell when you actually make contact with it. So, because it's so soft and squishy, which is kind of fun. So, that's usually what I do. That's the scourge of being like a professional scientist. It's like, ooh, a baby. And you just like, what's it gonna, feel it, check it out. His triglycerides are really soft, right? And he's like, everything's a science experiment. What's it doing for that baby, right? A little bit of impact resistance. So, so when you think about triglycerides storing energy longer term, and it's not just like what it does chemically, high density energy storage for longer term, but it's also strategically placed that gives you other properties as well, namely a little bit of impact resistance, and it has thermal properties. It's a really good insulator. So having the lipids on the outside, right under the skin, gives us all this nice insulating layer under the skin, like for heat balance, like literally for heat balance. So it does all kinds of, so it's like the cool properties of triglycerides is not just what they do chemically, but we also capitalize on where we can put them that gives us extra properties of it that we can use, which is kind of cool. More on this in a bit. Phospholipids. Cell membranes. Every membrane of every cell in your body has as its basis a phospholipid. And do you think next week we will go into the structure of all of these things?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, this is your homework for next week, right? Homework for next week is art. So you get to draw all of them. I had a student last year, like literally made oil paints, right, of them. She was an art major, right? And it's like, if I like make paintings of them, can I take it? It's like, yeah, totally. I think I gave her like a 3-day extension because it takes longer for that paint to dry. Cell membranes, cool. C, the third kind of lipid. Steroids. There are 3 that you're going to hear of a lot in your biological careers. One of which, or I say the 2 of which, are the ones that biochemically give us the physical structures of maleness and femaleness, right, as sex. Testosterone and estrogen. Okay, cool. There's a third one that we all know of, that we hear about, that does not give us any properties of maleness or femaleness or anything like that. It brings with it properties associated with the fluidity of the cell membrane. And it exists in every cell membrane of our body and the cell membrane of every cell in the animal kingdom. It is called cholesterol. More about what that looks like and how it works when we talk more in detail about lipids next week. We think of cholesterol as a kind of as a bad thing sometimes. It has interesting properties like building up in your artery walls in your heart, and well, you don't want high cholesterol. You want to eat high cholesterol foods and all that other kind of stuff. If you actually eat no cholesterol whatsoever in your diet because you're trying to avoid heart disease and things like that, you will still have a cholesterol count in your body. If you don't get it from your diet, your body will make it. It is fundamentally critically important to your cells to have cholesterol in the cell membrane. So it's like you can only reasonably get it down to about 50 or 60 cholesterol count in your blood. The lowest I ever had mine, I was running a lot of 5Ks and 10Ks. It was about 10 years ago when I went vegan for 2 years. Like fully whole food, plant-based vegan. Dropped about 20 pounds. I think I had my cholesterol down around like 90 or 100. Because it's like, your body literally needs cholesterol. And if you don't get it from your diet, you'll make it. And sometimes if you get a little bit of cholesterol in your diet, you'll be lower than if you have no cholesterol in your diet. So it's like, if you eat a tiny bit of cholesterol, you can get your cholesterol down to like 70 or 80. If you eat none, it'll pop up to about 100 because your body's going to be like, there's no cholesterol. Let's make what we can. It'll actually overcompensate a little bit for what the need is. Right? So cholesterol, we have a funny relationship with it because you can't live without it. If you don't get it in your diet, you'll make it. It's required for every cell, but it also kind of comes with, especially when combined with testosterone in the body, give us these wonderful properties and things like heart disease and myocardial infarction and all those things. But we got to go somehow, right? Lipids, perfect. I have so many stories about all of these macromolecules. I get to get my storyteller out in me next week. You're going to love it. You're going to love it or not. Proteins. Go ahead.
This is just a question about lipids.
Oh, you're fine.
I don't know if this
You're
is
fine.
a overcomplicated question either. You said it was strategically placed, like we were talking about like fats in general, or maybe you were talking specifically about triglycerides.
Those triglycerides are strategically placed.
So then why do some people, like, you can't get fat in the stomach? Like, you know how some people are like only fat in the stomach, but your legs
We call those men. Right?
No, I've seen.
Typically, yeah. There are some sex-specific differences between where I'm using very blanket binary terms, right? Where men and women tend to deposit fats. There's variation within all of them. I don't know if that's really related to the balance of estrogen and testosterone in the body. It might be a little bit, but it's like I have to gain a lot of weight for me to put fat anywhere besides like right here.
Do you think it has anything to do with like race or like ethnicity?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I thought it would have to do more with metabolizing all of the food.
All these are fantastic questions. This is great. You know what these questions mean? You're curious. I love it. I don't know the answer to either one of those questions. Right. I know there are some biological sex differences between words, and I mean women tend to deposit it kind of generally throughout. Guys tend to put it in the.
I've seen some like curvy guys though, like.
There can be curvy guys. Yeah, they can. Yeah, totally. So, and this is where physicists like roll their eyes at the biologists because for every single biological answer to everything you'll ever come up with, there's a yes, but I blah blah, but however, but there's this other thing. There's always this counterexample to it. So trying to find clear statistical trends in biology is not always easy to do. And there are other complicated things as well. When we get into Gregor-Mendel here in a couple of months in heredity, there are what is it called, Turner syndrome, like single X female, right? There's Klinefelters where you're double XY just from chromosomal breakage issues going on, and it's like strange, atypical chromosomal things can happen as well. They can muck with a little bit the typified lipid distribution in the body too. I haven't heard anything about race. Race is kind of a funny thing because it's like it's not actually a thing, but there might be patterns related to ancestral geographic inheritance patterns within populations from, a couple thousand years ago or something. I could imagine that. The last thing we want to do is like, you're from whatever because you have, it's like,
Yeah.
don't do that. Don't do that, right? It's not what's done. Go ahead.
Wouldn't it also matter like age too? Like,
It does, sort of. I mean, when you were first kind of saying, it's like there's people that don't deposit fat in their body, and it's like, yeah, they're under 25. Just wait. Just
Wait.
wait. Right? Just wait. I can make another graph up here. It looks like this. Don't write this one down. It's like metabolism, the rate at which you burn energy in your body, then age. Here's 25, and it's like, yeah. So it's like, you eat that pizza now, sir or ma'am, right? And you enjoy not gaining a pound from it. When you're up here, when you're 51, you don't even have to eat it. And it's like, yeah, and it's like, that's calories enough to gain 5.
What if it's already bad? It's gonna get like worse?
Mine seems to have plateaued, but it was, you can feel it, you can see it. I mean, once you hit 25 or 26, it's like, you just go, I should say I just went, and others say, about 25 or 26, you just go right off the cliff, right? I require about half the number of calories now than I did when I was 20.
Are you still like just as hungry or?
More so, even more. I could eat nonstop, but that's just me. I have this weird thing. I've met a couple of people that do this, or sort of feel this way. I could eat at any time. I could have dinner twice. It's like my relationship. People's relationship with food is complicated. Very, 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 very complicated. And it's like, and my wife, bless her poor sweet heart, is like, she does this weird thing. She eats when she's hungry and she doesn't eat when she's not.
Yeah.
I don't get that. It's like, what? And she tries to gauge when we eat by asking me if I'm hungry.
The answer is always yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's like we cannot use that as a basis for a relationship, right? Because it's not gonna. We have to have something else to base this relationship on, or it's just not going to work out. Because it's like we've been married 20 years. Our 20th anniversary is in May.
Oh.
I know. And it's like she still asks me. It's like, "Are you hungry?" And it's like, for 23 years, I've been saying I can eat at any time. I mean, the first question after lunch is, "What would you like for dinner? When's dinner?" I'm thinking about dinner while I'm eating lunch. So it's like, I'm not kidding. It's like, I met anybody else like that. You don't have to self-identify.
Yeah.
But people's relationship with food is complicated, and hunger is weird for me because like I eat 3 times a day because I feel like I should, and if I get hungry, then I'll eat 4. So I have this complex relationship with this gut, kind of thing. Because food is complicated. It's complicated. But this is real. This is real. So you can accommodate. The older you get, you'll probably calorically you will need fewer calories as you age typically, and as long as you keep your activity up, you'll be okay. But you cannot get away with eating an entire Domino's pizza without consequences when you're 30. So do it now, or don't. Don't form bad habits, Ralph.
Which day in May?
24th.
I was born when you were getting married.
What year?
23.
What
I'm
year were
sorry,
you?
2003. My bad.
2003?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were married in 2003. You were born on the day I was married.
Whoa.
Where at?
I know, Morocco.
Michigan. They must start with an M.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Jinx.
I said it first.
Shit.
Yeah.
Lecture's over.
Does your wife's name start with an M?
S.
My name starts with an M.
S. Anyway. Oh, that's so cute.
It's weird though.
It is weird. It is weird. Well,
Does that make you feel
I'm
old?
fine. What?
Does that make you feel old?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's a good thing. That's a good question. I don't feel old. Do I look like I feel old?
No.
I mean, do I act like I feel old? You know, it's like I'm still 17. My meat suit is 51. But I felt like the exact same person every day of my entire life.
That's amazing.
Every single day of my life, I felt like the same person.
And you better continue the same way.
And the same person that I've been my entire life says, man, I turned 25 and now my metabolism went to hell. So I can't eat an entire pizza anymore.
I mean, you can.
Fair point. Fair point. I might think about the consequences of that before I do so. You know,
Just ignore it.
hedonism. Proteins are made of a particular kind of macromolecule. I know what you're trying to do out there. Get him talking about his lovely wife, and we'll never talk about biology again. Amino acids. They're made of small molecules called amino acids. And of course, I'll say it again for the record, a lot more on all these macromolecules next week. So this isn't the final word on anything. We're just going through a little bit of a rundown here on introductory thing. They do two things. Start with one. They're structural. They provide structure to your body. So if we take Sylvie over here and take everything out of her with a huge suction thing, you know, and all we leave behind are proteins, she will still have about half the mass that she had before. So about half of your dry weight, take all the water out, of all the stuff that's left, about half of that is protein. So it's like you're mostly, at least half, you have more protein in you than anything else. Water notwithstanding, which is kind of cool. They're made, like I said, of amino acids. The second one, which is B, enzymes are made of amino acid chains as well. And it means enzymes do the work. So who in this room has muscles?
Everyone.
Maybe.
Maybe, I guess, right? Your muscles are made of enzymes, okay? And this is what enzymes do. They do work. They catalyze your reactions. They make things happen that wouldn't happen otherwise, or they make things happen faster. That would happen slower. So when you think about you have these proteins that are the enzyme variety. It's called actin and myosin, interlocking chains with each other. And they do one thing. When triggered by the body, they get shorter. So I'll get this one shorter right now. Ooh, I just made it shorter. And now to make it longer again. Oh, they don't get longer, they can only get shorter. So to get my arm straight again, I can't push from here. I have to pull from here, right? So it's like I can't straighten my arm using my bicep. If I straighten it, I can only use my tricep. So you can't use force to make them longer, you can only pull. So every muscle you have on your body that's skeletal has an oppositional muscle that does the opposite thing. And it has to, or else you would just kind of go like that and you'd never, you'd have to like a gravity situation, right? So think about your body as a series of oppositional muscles that are enzyme based, making everything shorter all the time. Good. The cool thing about enzymes, can I erase this?
Yes.
Are you digging the chalk thing, or should I go back to PowerPoint?
Chalk.
I like the chalk. What is an amino acid? Okay, how do you build one? So I will show you another functional group in the construction of this. Here's our central carbon. We can attach 4 things to it. We're just going to take this one up with a hydrogen, just like that. Over here, we're going to add a carboxyl group. Over here, we're gonna add a group called an amino group. On the bottom one, I'm gonna draw a big X. We can add anything down there. Anything that has that backbone structure is an amino acid. And you have all these different kinds of amino acids. All these different amino acids are different by virtue of what is attached down here to this central carbon on the bottom. There could be anything you want down here. You, as a human, use 20 different amino acids. For some things, it's a hydrogen. For other amino acids, it's a methyl group. For others, it's big, complicated rings, right? You can attach anything down here. They're all amino acids, and they would have different names to them, but they're all similar with this backbone. So how do you build an amino acid? You have a carbon, and then you just attach these functional groups that we talked about over here to either side, which give them fun properties. And the last one nucleic acids, of which there are 4 kinds. 4 kinds. Ooh, go ahead.
A, U, T, and G.
Excellent. No.
Instead of UT.
DNA. DNA, which is constructed of 4 different nucleotides,
A,
adenine, thymine,
G,
cytosine,
C.
and guanine. They have actually names.
I know, I don't just don't know them.
You will by the end. RNA. When we get a vaccine from Pfizer or Moderna, this gets injected into us.
Yay.
And in about a week, you'll be able to get the Omicron one because it got approved yesterday.
A fourth one?
What?
A fourth one?
A 4th.
Vaccine.
This is, you would be eligible for shot number 5, booster number 3, bivalent booster number 1. If you got them all. Being over 50. Here's the mind blower. Who took biology before and knows a little bit about it? Maybe just enough to get in trouble. Our 3rd kind of nucleotide, ATP. ATP. When we think about ATP is the energy source of the body, right? We'll talk about ATP a lot. It's how you fuel your biological reactions. Actually, fun fact, it's a nucleotide. It's a nucleic acid. D, which this didn't used to be included too often. Now it is a little bit more. Transfer RNA, or little tRNA. We'll get into this a lot more in a month or 2. It's the RNA-based molecules that shuttle the relationship between an RNA chain and an amino acid when you build proteins using the DNA template. They're unique and they're specific. So they sort of get their own. In high school, it's like these 3, and welcome to college, transfer RNA. Right? Cool beans. Cool beans. Did we get enough for lecture today? Did we get enough for lecture today? Selena, are you doing okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. So in 15 minutes or so, we are